In 2014, something changed in India. Narendra Modi became prime minister, and he walked into a country that was broken in ways most people didn't want to admit. A nation stuck in the past while the world raced into the future. 10 years later, India looks completely different, almost unrecognizable. But recently, a junior minister named Rajiv Chandrasekhar stood at a startup event and asked a question that set the nation on fire. Are Indian startups just glorified delivery services? Are they really nothing more than a cheap labor racket dressed up as innovation? He looked at the audience and delivered a reality check nobody wanted to hear. He said that 80% of Indian startups are basically meaningless, that the country is stuck solving basic problems like getting food from one place to another while the rest of the world races ahead into the future. His speech was brutal, honest, and it hurt. But here's the thing, was he completely wrong? Or was he missing something much bigger about what India has actually achieved in the last decade? Because what happened in India in the last decade isn't just about startups or delivery apps. It's about a complete transformation of a nation. A decade where India went from being a country struggling with basic infrastructure to becoming a global powerhouse in ways nobody expected. This is that story. Look, nobody can deny the facts. When someone compares India to China in terms of innovation, India falls short. Electric vehicles? China is miles ahead. Artificial intelligence? China's dominating. Semiconductors? Robotics? The same story repeats itself. Chinese products in these sectors are literally years ahead of anything India produces right now. And that stings. It really does. But hold on for a second. Is this comparison even fair? Think about it. India and China have walked completely different paths. They're two different nations with two different systems, two different approaches to growth. Starting from the 1990s, China's authoritarian government made strong top-down decisions that pushed the country onto a completely different trajectory. They built infrastructure overnight. They forced industries to develop. They had the power to make things happen without asking anyone. India? India is the opposite. It's a democracy. A chaotic, beautiful, messy democracy where growth is driven from the bottom up. Small entrepreneurs, individual dreamers, grassroots movements. The growth is slower, yes, but it's real. It's organic. It comes from the people, not forced by the government. For decades, India spent its time solving basic human needs: food, shelter, water, electricity, things that China had already figured out. But now that foundation is built. India has set a target that seemed impossible just a few years ago. The country wants to become a developed nation in the next 25 years. And honestly, the country's already on track to make it happen. The India of 2014 looked nothing like the India of today. Nothing. And that transformation didn't happen by accident. It happened because of 7 massive changes that reshaped the entire nation from the ground up. Let's talk about them. This is going to sound crazy, but 10 years ago, a huge chunk of Indians didn't even have electricity. Yes, electricity, something so basic, so essential, and millions of people were living without it. According to a World Bank report from 2014, around 264 million people, which is 20% of India's entire population, had zero access to electricity. 1/5 of the nation was sitting in complete darkness. And for those who did have power, massive power cuts were normal. Rural households got electricity for only 12 and a half hours a day. Half the day was just gone. Dark. But something incredible happened after 2014. In just 4 years, India achieved 100% electrification. 4 years. Let that sink in. There's a picture that shows India at night before 2014. Big cities like Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, and Kolkata glowed brightly while the rest of the country sat in darkness. Clusters of light surrounded by an ocean of black. Urban India had everything. Rural India had nothing. Now look at the same picture taken 10 years later. The entire country is lit up. The heartland of India, the villages, the small towns, all glowing with light. The gap between urban and rural India started closing. How did this happen? In 2015, the government launched the Deen Dayal Upadhyaya Gram Jyoti Yojana. The mission was simple but ambitious: bring power to every single village in India. By 2018, they declared success. Every village was electrified. Then came the Saubhagya scheme to electrify every home. Over 28 million new homes got electricity in just 3 years. Power supply became consistent too. In 2014, the average was 17.4 hours of electricity per day. By 2024, it jumped to 22.6 hours. That extra power allowed small businesses to thrive. Farmers could work longer. Factories ran more shifts. Productivity skyrocketed. This was the first real step. India was finally becoming a modern economy. Now let's talk about something that seemed completely impossible a decade ago: India becoming a global data powerhouse. Today, India has the cheapest mobile data in the entire world. The amount of data an average Indian consumes is way more than people in developed countries. And the internet speed? India is now among the fastest in the world. But in 2014, only 250 million Indians had access to the internet. That's 1 in every 5 people. And the internet they had was painfully slow. The average mobile data speed was just 1.3 megabits per second. China had 3.4, the United States had 6.5, Singapore had 30, India was crawling while the world was sprinting. Because the speed was so slow, Indians barely used any data, just 18 megabytes per user per month. China was at 126 megabytes. The US was at 1.8 gigabytes. The difference was massive. And the cost? 1 gigabyte of mobile data cost between 250 to 300 rupees back then. Today it's 10 to 15 rupees. That's a revolution. Fast forward to now. India has 971 million internet users, up from 250 million in 2014. Almost a billion people connected to high-speed internet. In a digital global economy, that's raw power. These billion internet users form a strong consumer base for Indian businesses. More people online means government welfare programs can reach them directly without middlemen eating away the funds. Former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi once said that of every rupee the government spends on welfare, only 15 pies reaches the actual person who needs it. The internet killed that leakage. One of the most visible changes India went through is digital payments. Thanks to UPI, everyone from tea sellers to street performers to beggars on the road has a QR code now. Everyone has a bank account linked to it. In 2024, India accounted for 49% of all global real-time transactions. 49%. If someone looks at the complete list of countries, India did more transactions than the next 9 countries combined. Why did India become so massive in digital payments? Because unlike other countries where private companies introduced digital payment systems, the Indian government made it a public good, free for everyone. Other nations noticed. Experts from around the world praised India's digital payments journey. Now the Indian government is helping other countries replicate the same success. But how did India pull this off so quickly? It started in 2014 with Jan Dhan Yojana. Under this scheme, 55 crore new bank accounts were opened. The goal was to give every Indian a bank account. Then in 2016 came UPI, which made paying through mobile phones incredibly easy. What companies like Alipay and Square were doing on a small scale in their countries, the Indian government did for 1 billion people and fast. Now that India has one of the most advanced digital payment infrastructures in the world, it's helping other sectors grow too. Digital businesses can collect payments instantly. Earlier, dealing with cash consumed massive company resources, depositing money waiting for days for it to reflect in accounts. Now it happens in seconds. Digital payments push the formalization of India's economy faster than anyone expected. And this rise, combined with a large internet user base, led to an explosion in the number of startups and unicorns. In 2014, India had only about 350 startups, mostly concentrated in big cities like Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi. Today, India has 160,000 startups. That's 450 times the growth. And these startups aren't just in metro cities anymore. They're everywhere. According to the India Startup Report of 2024, startups now exist in 670 of India's 786 districts. 50% of all startups are in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. Small towns are producing big ideas. Now let's talk unicorns. Until 2014, India had just 3 unicorns: two of them mainly targeted foreign clients. Flipkart was the only true Indian unicorn serving Indian customers. Today, India has over 118 unicorns, ranking only behind the United States and China. And most of these unicorns became billion-dollar companies by serving Indian customers. The old belief that Indians don't pay for digital products? Completely destroyed. There's Mensa Brands, which achieved unicorn status in just 6 months. Zepto pioneered the dark store model for quick commerce, a model now copied by startups worldwide. Then there are hardware startups like IdeaForge, exporting military and industrial drones to over 20 countries. India now has cutting-edge startups in nanotechnology, fusion energy, space, satellites, and robotics. The main reason the Indian startup ecosystem exploded is funding. 10 years ago, Indian startups raised about $1.5 billion in an entire year. Today, they raise that much in just 1 month. Earlier, global venture capital firms didn't see India as a distinct market. They had Asia-specific funds, and India was just one geography among many. Today, leading VC firms like Sequoia, Lightspeed, and Accel have India-specific funds, and the fund sizes keep growing every year. When VCs get successful exits through IPOs or acquisitions, it signals to the world that India has big opportunities. Tiger Global invested $1.2 billion in Flipkart. When Walmart acquired the company, Tiger Global made $3.5 billion in profit. Funds like Sequoia and Accel made massive returns from IPOs of companies like Zomato, Swiggy, and Mama Earth. Then there's a new wave of angel investors, solo investors who made money in India and are giving back to the ecosystem. People like Anupam Mittal and Kunal Bal have invested in over 200 startups. These angel investors are way more accessible to young founders than big VC firms. India has historically been a socialist country. If someone made a lot of money starting a business, society didn't like them much. That changed in the last 10 years. It started when Prime Minister Narendra Modi talked about promoting startups in his Independence Day speech in 2015. In 2016, the government formally launched the Startup India scheme. Tax holidays, simplified laws, fast-track patent applications. Then came the Fund of Funds for Startups worth 10,000 crore rupees, where the government partnered with the private sector to fund promising startups. This is common in China, where major companies receive government support. Now India is doing the same. The government has grants and dedicated funds in almost all major sectors. Agnikul Cosmos developed India's first private satellite launch vehicle. They got early funding from IDEX, Innovations for Defense Excellence, under the Ministry of Defense. A huge number of Indian startups have received government support in the form of grants and funding. The best example of government-private collaboration is India's space sector, which has done phenomenally well in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, ISRO was just a regular space agency with some achievements, but nothing spectacular. The world first noticed ISRO in 2014 when India's Mars orbiter mission, Mangalyaan, successfully reached Mars's orbit. India became the first Asian country to achieve this and the fourth in the world. But the real achievement wasn't just reaching Mars. It was the efficiency. The entire Mangalyaan mission was completed in just 18 months and cost only $74 million. NASA's Maven mission, which also went to Mars, took 5 years and cost $651 million. It literally cost more money to make the movie The Martian than it cost India to send a real mission to Mars. Then India beat other countries in exploring the moon. In 2023, India became the first nation in the world to land a spacecraft near the moon's south pole, a region believed to have water. These two missions established that ISRO is in the top league. Now ISRO is helping young startups solve the most challenging space problems. India has ambitious plans for the next decade. In 2026, the country plans to launch Gaganyaan, India's first manned space mission. ISRO wants to set up India's own space station by 2035, making it the fourth country after the US, Russia, and China to have one. And India aims to send humans to the moon by 2040, joining the US and China in that race. India's growth is best symbolized by ISRO, an organization that began with borrowed technology and scrappy launches, has now become a global space power, sending missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond. These are some of the major wins India has had in the last 10 years. Things most people wouldn't have guessed would happen. Of course, the country still has a long way to go. But here's what people don't understand about India. Here's what makes this transformation even more incredible. India doesn't just do things. India does things at a scale that defies human logic. Think about it. When India became independent in 1947, the country had 340 million people. 340 million. That's more than the entire population of the United States today. And India had to build a nation for all of them, from scratch, with zero administrative experience, with the British leaving behind a broken system and massive poverty. Most countries would have crumbled. Most would have taken shortcuts. Most would have compromised on democracy, on fairness, on inclusion. But India? India decided to do the hardest thing possible. Build a democracy where every single voice counts. Let's talk about India's first election in 1951. The scale was insane. 176 million voters had to be registered. And here's the problem. 82% of them couldn't read or write. 82%. How do you hold a free and fair election when most people can't even read the candidate's name? The solution was brilliant. Election symbols. Every candidate got a unique symbol, a lotus, a hand, a cycle, an elephant. These symbols were pasted on ballot boxes. Voters just had to recognize the symbol and drop their ballot paper in the right box. Simple, effective, genius. The turnout? 45% overall, but in some areas it hit 80%. Western experts were shocked. They thought India would fail. They thought democracy couldn't work in a country with such massive illiteracy. They were wrong. India proved that democracy isn't just for the educated elite. Democracy is for everyone. But challenges didn't stop there. By the late 1950s and 60s, election rigging became rampant. Politicians would capture polling booths. They'd stuff ballot boxes with fake votes. The system was getting corrupted. So in 1977, India's election commission came up with something revolutionary: electronic voting machines, EVMs. Two professors from IIT Bombay designed them. After trials, the machines were deployed in 1982 for a single seat in Kerala. But there was a legal problem. EVMs weren't technically part of Indian law. So in 1988, Parliament amended the Constitution. By 2004, EVMs were used in every single constituency. Today, India conducts elections with almost 1 billion voters. 1 billion. The country uses 5 million EVMs to count votes. And it doesn't matter if you live on a remote mountain or deep inside a jungle. Your vote counts, always. That's the Indian election system, the largest democratic exercise in human history. And it works. Let's talk about something India did that shocked the entire world. Financial technology, fintech. In less than a decade, India brought hundreds of millions of people into the digital economy. Hundreds of millions. People who never had bank accounts. People who lived on cash. Suddenly, they're making digital payments from their phones. It started with one question. How do you make digital payments as easy as sending a text message? The answer was UPI, Unified Payments Interface, a platform to transfer money instantly through your phone. Free, open, simple. Today, UPI handles 640 million transactions every single day. Compare that to Visa. Visa handles 639 million transactions daily. But Visa is global. UPI is almost exclusively used in India. Think about that. India's digital payment system processes more transactions than the world's largest global payment network. That's insane. But UPI didn't happen in isolation. It's part of a larger digital ecosystem. Aadhaar gave every Indian a unique biometric identity. This made opening bank accounts and completing KYC verification incredibly easy. Here's what makes India different. In the West, fintech is seen as a luxury. It's an added bonus for the rich, a convenience. India didn't digitize the rich. India digitized everyone. The tea seller, the vegetable vendor, the daily wage worker, everyone. And the world noticed. Countries are now copying India's model. The open-source digital public good approach is becoming a template for developing nations. But this success didn't happen by accident. Three things made it possible. First, political will. Indian leaders didn't settle for less. They wanted scale. They wanted inclusion, whatever the cost. Second, keeping services public. The railways are still government-owned. UPI is still anchored by the government. This keeps services affordable and people-centric. Profit isn't the focus. People are. Third, the people themselves. Nobody expected an illiterate electorate to become a thriving democracy. But Indians didn't squander their rights. They valued their vote. They cherished it. Same with digitization. Rich countries in the West still run on cards and cash. How could India go cashless? Again, Indians defied expectations. India's success in scaling is a testimony to all these factors. The country doesn't just make things work for a few. India makes things work for 1.4 billion people. As that minister said, India has to compete on the world scale. Whether it's making semiconductor chips or building foundational AI models, there's work to do. But people need to remember how far India has come from where it started. The biggest thing that happened in the last 10 years is this. 1 billion Indians became part of the growth journey. Earlier, most people didn't have internet, electricity, or bank accounts. They didn't have a voice. Now they do. And in the next 10 years, a big chunk of economic output will come from these people. India's story isn't about shortcuts or authoritarian control. It's about 1 billion people rising together, slowly but surely, building a nation from the bottom up. It's messy. It's chaotic. But it's real. The country that once sat in darkness now lights up the night sky. The nation that barely had internet users now leads the world in data consumption. The economy that struggled with basic infrastructure now sends rockets to Mars at a fraction of the cost others spend. This is India's silent revolution. Not loud, not forced, but unstoppable. So here's the final question. If India could transform this much in just 10 years, what will the next 10 years bring? The answer is being written right now, by every entrepreneur in a small town, by every scientist in a lab, by every dreamer who refuses to accept that India can't compete with the best. The revolution isn't coming. It's already here.